Hello, 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 gaming enthusiasts, developers, publishers, and even my mom. Thank you so much for watching, Mom. I appreciate it. It means a lot to me. How are y'all doing today? Welcome to the Game Devs of Color Expo 2020. I am the Purple Sharpie, otherwise known as Sharpie, and it is my pleasure to bring you some fantastic developers today responsible for the brand new independently made game Solace State. I have Tanya as well as Gabby. Welcome both. How are y'all doing today?
So excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us. We just love this show and we love Games Devs of Color. It's just so exciting always, every single year.
Tanya, can I get a quick synopsis about Solace State from you?
Absolutely. Solace State is a 3D visual novel driven by your choices. So you're playing as Chloe. She's a young hacker who's trying to find her political identity again in the midst of a surveillance society that is actually undergoing a biotech revolution. So the choices you make in trying to find your friends again is actually going to impact not just your friends, but also yourself, as well as the people around you. So your intimate choices are impacting both their sense of confidence as well as their sense of confidence in the state of things. So hopefully it'll be a solace.
Yeah, I love that. Let's go ahead, and I believe we actually have a quick little gameplay trailer from the game. Why don't we go ahead and play that, and then we can talk a little bit more about it, all right?
Rebecca, tell me what you'd do. The city of your childhood, has it changed from what you remember? Has everyone moved on? Has something been lost to them that they can no longer articulate? Or are they sparring with new demands and civic muscle? You taught me not to fear change. It's not change I fear. Hidden data unfurls like fossilized spines to us. Since we can dissect it without leaving a trace, we've never hurt anyone with this, really. But there are secrets of the powerful that can propel us to guard our breaths, bodies, and hearts for fear of... But out in the crowds, can all these folks still grasp their future? Or have their beacon of hope shattered? Are they willing to take a stance? Will they side with us? Have you really gone missing, Rebecca? Has the city taken you? Or have you taken the city to push it to its limits?
Wow. Okay. That was immersive. That was definitely incredibly immersive. I love it. Now, here's what I'm actually going to start off by asking. This is a question for you here, Tanya. Where did the narrative idea from the story come from?
Oh, so many places, to be honest. I feel like we're sitting on the shoulders of giants in terms of everything from incredible film. I grew up with a lot of films in which they tell a very immersive political story, from Syriana to like even Babel, which was the earlier name for this project, actually, to pay homage to that. And to just, I come from a political science background myself, so I really drew from that notion and curiosity about, like, how can we come to more horizontal governance? How can we bring people's voices to the fore? What is that actually like? I've just continually had that question been on the forefront of my mind for a very long time, but was always not very comfortable with necessarily going directly into politics, for example. So I wanted to use my voice in a different way to help tell stories. So that's where that comes from. And I just feel like there's just so much inspiration that I take. Also, like amazing games like BioShock, for example, being able to tell incredible stories about big immersive worlds, to indie games such as Analog, A Hate Story by Christine Love.
Oh, that game's so good. That was actually the very first visual novel I ever played. Like, it's crazy that you would name drop that.
And of course, like from that, I really took inspiration from just talking to activists. I think at the end of the day, it's through my political science background, it's like I mean, back then it wasn't called doom scrolling, but like I did read a lot of articles about like why are people protesting? What are they fighting for? But also sometimes some of the violent action that are taken upon protesters, which 5 years ago, when I first started wanting to create this project, wasn't as big of not as centralized in Western society. But nowadays, especially after the tragedy and abhorrent murder of George Floyd, it's become much more obvious that the current society is not very responsive to any protesters, to any action of people wanting for change. So it's been complex journey in writing this, but also making sure that like our ability of creating art still resonates, and that's a challenge and weight that I want to continue to take upon me as well.
So before we move any further into those topics, because you covered a plethora of topics that I really, really want to go deep into, I want to first congratulate you because this game did actually win the Ubisoft Indie Series Award of 2020, and it was nominated for the Best Story Game at the Indie Arena Booth 2020. That is most assuredly a fantastic accomplishment. And I'd like to literally congratulate you both on that.
Thank you so much.
Now, before we move a little bit more into some of the poli-sci behind the narrative, I'd like to actually go to you, Gabby, and I'd like to understand exactly, because I'm not going to lie, the gameplay is incredibly advanced from a dev standpoint, right? It is a visual novel, but it's not a standard visual novel. It is a 3D visual novel, meaning that there's a lot of complex camera movement that we don't typically see. I'd like to see how you addressed some of those movements from the developing and lead programming standpoint, if you could.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the things that's the most different about this game is that even though it's a visual novel, it's a 3D world, and that means that we have a lot of complexity that regular visual novels don't face. Most of them are also related with the fact that our text is also not screen. So if you look at the trailer, the things that if you look at the demo as well, the text that you see like that's not screen based. That's 3D based as well. So everything has to be placed in the world. Everything has to be in its own position. Nothing. Some things are generated on screen, which makes my life easier. But the text that's 3D placed, we had to create a system to understand when it gets the information from. We are using Artisy for deriving the narrative, and we had to create a system to make Unity understand that this information that's coming from Artisy has to go into this specific place, and when this specific point in the narrative is reached, this camera movement has to happen, and these things have to appear on screen, and these other things have to go away. It was a bit complex. It is an in-house tool that I made for us, and it's just based on it receives the node from Artisy. And I tell we have kind of an array of nodes with that information attached. And then every time you reach a node, it's just like, oh, so this has to be hidden, this has to be shown, this particular text has to go into that place, and so on and so forth.
No, thank you so much for dissecting that for us. It definitely gives great insight into how we really got more of the story here. Now, I'd like to defer back over to you, Tanya, because I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the standard visual novel mechanics that we see in here. It seems to have a choice-based mechanic. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So the choice-based mechanic is, well, first of all, it's so great that Gabby and I work together really well to make sure that the system is really robust and has a lot of variables built in. So the characters that you meet in the game, where you have conversations with them, you constantly do get a sense of not only are they asking you questions which can impact your life, but they're also recording information as to, oh, how is this person on a team? But it's very contextual to what that character themselves would privilege and focus on. So for example, in Hakim, in this Act 1, Scene 1 section, Hakim, who is really Chloe's mentor and supervisor, he is actually going to look more at Chloe's ability to form teams and how is her work going. So like he's measuring that under the hood. We don't directly give you like a score like, oh, now it's like +5, now you're leveling up. In fact, we're showing that usually more through expressions and also narrative tone in terms of the writing. So it does branch. Later on, sometimes you'll even see camera branching paths as well. And then additional characters, which are romanceable characters, and I know a lot of people are excited about that part. They will be, of course, measuring intimacy to your character, not just teamwork, but also the line of intimacy. The amount of variables that we have in those sequences is really interesting because like one thing can go up, but another thing can go down. For example, they're not always going to like, just because one person's intimate with a character doesn't mean that their confidence in society can go up, for example. So all of these things combined together, which we think will make a really interesting game and also expose you to like multiple endings at the end of the game as well.
Now, I want to touch a little bit more on the intimacy and romantic relationships that you can have inside of the game. Because, of course, per any visual novel, you know, you got to have it, right? How did community building and general relationships for LGBTQ community or people of color really play into that, given the current socioeconomic that we see both inside of the games universe and inside of our universe? How did you manage to create a relatable romance story from that?
Absolutely. And I think that's a great question. Oh my gosh.
Stop holding for you. Yeah. Take your time.
One of the aspects of which is really exciting is that we've really tackled this from the framework of like the personal can change, and that does also impact like revolutions in society. So the tagline runs a little smoother, of course, but in that, I think it's really interesting of the spin of the personal is political. That's what it is at the end of the day. And the relationships with which you build in terms of the intimate romantic relationships can sometimes come from Chloe's backgrounds. Like this is what she's familiar with. For example, you get to meet an ex-flame or an ex/old flame. And it's really interesting because they also have slightly different socioeconomic expectations. And when they meet up again, this can spark other kind of conversations with other characters. So it becomes a kind of almost the only trickle-down effect I can think of that actually works, where it's like one impact impacts another. And I think that's really exciting, in which like people can, through little words, can really impact each other. And that's what we try to formulate in this game. And I think in the real world, one of the books that really, there's so many books that have helped us on this journey of writing the game, but one of the books that really helped us is a book by the name of Emergent Strategy by Aria Mary Brown, which focuses on like small strategies. One of the first chapters is focusing on like the small aspects of what you can do in your everyday life. And it then kind of branches out to other people as well. Like, how does that look like? And she's a Black activist and has some really interesting and just poetic ways of framing that as well. And so that would be an incredible real world example. She describes it as fractals, the relationship between small and large. I'm sorry, I'm just like pulling out books now. I hope.
No, you're
cut me off.
answered the question so succinctly. Thank you very much for that. You're correct. I think just saying it in the simple phrase that you used earlier, which I apologize, I'm going to somewhat misquote, but the idea that just there's so much activism and there's so much active, sometimes just being yourself is the most political discourse that you can be. I believe you said something along those lines. And that's such a true statement even today. And we see it a lot inside of the character's general respect, or I should say lack of respect of authority that she has in certain areas of the game. But we see it even more as it progresses inside of the demo. Now, I apologize, the demo was a little bit short, so I didn't actually get to touch that much of it. But I was very interested in a couple of other features in the game, and I'd like to talk a little bit about this with you, Gabby. How actually difficult was it to some of the context that I'm seeing, specifically with the UI, where we still get into the choice-based features. Specifically, these are classic visual novel choice representations: A or B, A or B, A and B, and as we progress, we get different options in it. How difficult was that to track from a programmer standpoint later as we go through the game?
I'd say that like for the regular choices like A and B, the ones we have in certain points, those are relatively easy because you really just need like a simple flag of like you chose this or you chose that. When it comes to the hack, which is one of the key gameplay mechanics that we have, that is complex. The hack is very complex because there are not only you have several choices, and within those choices you have more choices. And it was, I won't say it was like impossible or anything, but it was definitely much more difficult than like, are you going right or are you going left, right? There is a lot of calculation that goes into it as well, and this is something also that Tanya has to deal with when she's writing, is thinking about like how much should this particular choice that you make in this particular point increase the political, like change the political affiliations of the character you're talking with, or the people you're influencing, or even yourself, or even like how will this affect my relationship and intimacy with another character that's present in the scene and is seeing you make these choices. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but it's math.
Now, okay. Tanya, I'd like to bring it back over to you because I know that this game is coming to Steam later in 2021, and I know that there's currently a playable version of the demo on Steam as well. Now, I'm a little bit interested because what I understand is that this game actually had a K-pop inspired soundtrack, as well as what I'm seeing as being personally described by either yourself or someone on your team as an edgy and youthful atmosphere. Can you tell me a little bit more about why both of those components are so important for this game?
Yeah, I think I'm very inspired by K-pop, and And part of that, I think, is so much about this aspect of East meets West. And you can tell from just the environment of the game that this is a little bit of a city that mixes those elements. It doesn't really exist so much in real life, but it has those elements of contextualizing perhaps like a little bit of those democratic institutions, a little bit from both Eastern perspective, East Asian specifically, perspectives, as well as Western perspectives. So to that point, I think I've been really inspired by K-pop's influence as well. So we've really been working with that kind of electronic sound inspired by that music. I also remember very early on when I first got into K-pop music, for example, it was really about realizing kind of that, hey, there's other people who look like me and they can actually have a voice. And that's kind of where I'm playing off of that aspect a lot more. And that, they can have the voice of their locality more than anything else. I think that's the aspect of which really inspired me. So I think the kind of youthful, edgy element is maybe better described as like sass, because I think Chloe is a super sassy character. In terms of edgy, I would say that sometimes like there's definitely different forms of activism involved. Some will be much more kind of soft. And that's not to say that soft is not strong. Soft is actually super strong. But other folks might be more like, let's push it as far as we can. So we really want to present that aspect of different forms of activism. They all might be on the same side, but some might be more willing to speak the hard truth each and every single time. And others will be more kind of like
private.
Private, and maybe even like working around corners or working within establishments. So I think it's like different aspects of that is what I really want to achieve with this game.
I'd like to touch a little bit more on that idea of essentially how you dealt with revolutionary concepts inside of the game, because it is such a fresh moment, as everyone knows, because of our current quarantine climate, and just like you stated earlier, due to protest because of the unfair treatment of African-American individuals inside the United States of America. I'd like to touch a little bit more on that, not specifically the current economic status of the United States of America, but specifically how you took the theme from cyberpunk and sci-fi and put that on top of this lens to create an even more important revolutionary style. Specifically, I'd like to know why you opted to co-op specifically those genres to best tell your story in this universe.
Sure.
I'm so sorry. I apologize. I said the word co-op, and I feel like that takes a little bit away from what you're trying to do. I feel like you utilized it very well, not necessarily co-opting it, but I feel like you expressed it fantastically using those genres. And I'd love to see you explain it even more to best help us understand why those are perfect genres for this game.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great question. It's cyberpunk to me is something that is almost borderless in case of like Western societies have looked at it as both a story of dispossession, perhaps, of some of their perhaps their ideology. And then in East Asia, at least, it's also been utilized often to talk about loss of their sovereignty. So I would say I lean a little bit more in terms of like the use of cyberpunk to talk about hegemony, to talk about the idea of like hope within so tight restraints of increasing authoritarianism and increasing surveillance. And at least at the beginning of the game, we try to actually present a case in which, hey, this society actually wasn't that bad before. There were like elements of freedoms and progressivism. Why did it fall so dark so fast? And quite frankly, when I wrote this, lockdown wasn't a thing. We started having a core story for the parts that you see in the demo, actually, like starting 3 years ago. So it's actually like sometimes the real world moves faster than what we're able to talk about a lot of the times. Yeah, so going back to political science, like the idea of using cyberpunk is that in classical political science, a lot of times statespeople are presumed to have a lot of rational ideas. Like they're rationally able to control certain aspects of their outcomes because they are rational people and they have access to all of the information possible. You can see in current day that's not really the case in real world. And also in Solace State, we really want to give Chloe the power or the ability to read more into people, to have a kind of aspect of social hacking in which she's able to see a little bit more, maybe empathize. But maybe not. And we really want to promulgatize that aspect of you have access to so much data now because you're a hacker. Do you actually interpret it in a way in which the consequences are what you expect them to be?
I completely understand what you're saying here. Those are great motifs to know regarding the story, and it sounds like cyberpunk in general was a fantastic choice here to give that lens to look at the novel through. Well, I believe that's actually going to do it for our amount of time here today, unfortunately, but I want to thank both you, Tanya, as well as yourself here, Gabby, for coming on and speaking a little bit more about Solace State with us. Thank you so much. Can you let us know where we can expect to find more content regarding the game? I know that it's going to be released in 2021. We can currently wishlist the game on Steam, which I highly recommend everybody watching do. But where can we find out more knowledge and keep in contact with both of y'all regarding the state of the game?
Absolutely. So you can definitely wishlist us, as mentioned. Thank you so much for mentioning that, Sharpie. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Solace State Game. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vivid Foundry. Also, there is also Vivid Foundry on Twitter as well as oh dear, there's the last one there. Facebook as well.
Discord?
Yes, yay! Yay! All right, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of which is also available. I believe all those social links are also on your Steam. So if people do go to the Steam page, go ahead and wishlist it. They can find links to all of those right there. Thank you so much again, Tanya. Thank you so much, Gabby.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's going to go ahead and do it for yet another interview with fantastic developers at today's Game Dev of Color Expo 2020. Now, look, we have to mention that there is a very, 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 very active Discord for Solace State. I am a part of it. Why are you not? Go ahead and join that Discord. And without any further ado, I'll see you later. Maybe I'll be inside the chat. Who knows? Bye, y'all. See ya in a bit.